Hi, I am Chad Kent, a.k.a. the Constitution Guy with Conservative Daily News, and tonight I'm here with Dick Morris, political strategist, best-selling author, and all-around political giant. Thanks for being with me tonight.
Good to be here. Now tell me, you do constitutional stuff?
Correct.
Well, I have some constitutional amendments to suggest.
I would love to do that afterwards.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Shall we talk about it now?
Sure, let's hear what they are.
Well, I think that the most important thing is you have to cut Congress out of the process, because they'll never vote term limits on themselves, and we need term limits.
Absolutely.
So I believe that the reason that we've never used in our history the method of amending the Constitution that the Constitution provides for that does not involve Congress, which is to call a constitutional convention. And the reason we've never done that is people are afraid to do it because they're worried that everything will be up. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the whole bit. You could create a dictatorship if you want.
Correct.
So what I'm proposing is that we have a constitutional amendment to permit the state legislatures, as they can now, to summon a constitutional convention, but to limit the agenda as they specify. So they could, for example, say, we want a constitutional convention to consider the issue of term limits. And then the delegates would be elected, they would write an amendment, they would approve it, and then the state legislatures would be able to pass it, three-quarters of them, but it would bypass Congress.
Yeah.
And I think that that is very necessary if we're going to have the same kind of turnover that we need in Washington.
That's an interesting idea, because the main problem with the Constitutional Convention is the idea that anything could happen. You could just throw out the entire thing, and that's what people are afraid of.
Now, there's a second idea that also is kicking around that I really like, which is to permit the legislatures and the governors of three-quarters of the states to override an act of Congress.
Like Obamacare.
Yes.
Correct.
So that you could literally have three-quarters of the states have a majority in each house of their legislature, and the governor sign a bill and nullify the action of Congress. Now, this isn't to be confused with John C. Calhoun's nullification.
Yeah.
That was to secede from the Union. This really is to give the states the power they originally had in this wonderful republic and have since then been horribly eroded.
Those are great ideas to consider, and I think what I like about both of them is they're all about limiting power and limiting the federal government, which is something that has gotten completely out of control, basically, really since the 17th Amendment, in my opinion. But
well, I think that we have another opportunity coming up if we win this election in 12, which I think we will, in one piece of legislation and one movement. The legislation is to block grant social welfare programs like Medicaid and food stamps, and block grant them to the states and let the states decide how to spend it. And the other is the effort that's underway in Ohio and Indiana and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Florida and other states to restore the power to run the schools to the elected representatives, not to the unions.
Yeah.
And to cut the union contract out of anything except wages and hours, not specifying tenure or pay, opposing merit pay. Those two steps will return to the states two-thirds of their government, because two-thirds of the state's budget is on education and health care. Right now, all the state can do is run its prisons and its motor vehicles bureau.
Right.
The education's run by the union and the contract negotiation, and Medicaid is run by the Congress. So I think that we're really going to have a comeback of the 10th Amendment, and I think that'll be a big deal next year.
It's definitely something I'm hearing a lot about. And that's one of the things actually I wanted to get into with you tonight, is there's been a huge surge in interest in the Constitution lately. So how do you think that affects the way politicians approach their campaigns? And the one I had in mind in particular was Kathy Hochul in New York, who said about Obamacare with this birth control mandate that they didn't look to the Constitution for that. How does that affect how they approach those races?
Well, I think that it's no question that our Constitution is under assault by those who, first of all, would ignore it, but also by those who would apply international law to it. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the growth of international law in our Supreme Court decisions. And our system of governance is far freer and far more democratic than any other countries. And when you start applying the precepts of international law, it becomes very damaging. I have a book coming out on May 8th called Screwed. How other countries are ripping us off and how our leaders are letting them do it. One of the things I talk about there is a group of 5 treaties that are now being negotiated or have been signed and are up for ratification that would override much of our Constitution. Now, you know, according to our Constitution, any treaty that's signed and ratified by the Senate has the same status as constitutional law. A Congress or legislature may not override it. So one of them is the International Criminal Court, which defines a new crime, the crime of aggression. And that means going to war without UN approval, which means without Russia and China agreeing. And it creates a criminal liability for the president who does that. And when George Bush was going to go to Switzerland to accept an award after he left office, he canceled the trip because of reports that he would be arrested because Switzerland is a signatory to that agreement. Another important one is the Small Arms Treaty, which will impose a global regimen on arms control and permit a backdoor change of the sort that would never be ratified by Congress. The other, which has been signed already and is up for adoption and ratification in May and June, and we have to work hard against it, is the Law of the Sea Treaty, which specifies that the United States would have to share with the UN 50% of its royalties for all oil and minerals mined within 200 miles of its coastline. And then the UN would decide where that money goes, and we would have only one of 160 votes in deciding that. So these threats, which are being done as treaties to literally override our Constitution, are, I think, very dangerous.
So how do we make that an issue? That's one of my questions is, you know, right now we have a president that is pretty open about his willingness to step around the Constitution. He doesn't seem to care. How do we make that an issue, and can we make it effective?
Well, first, we beat them. But secondly, I think that in May and June, when the Law of the Sea Treaty comes up for ratification in the Senate, we all need to work hard to defeat that. And there are Republicans who are supporting it. John McCain is for it. Dick Lugar is for it. There's heavy Republican support, and we need to pressure Republicans around the country to stand up and reject this.
So how do we do that? How do we build up the support for those things and explain to people the danger without getting into the fanatic side or making people think we're crazy?
Social media, viral email, blogging. Go to it.
We get, believe it or not, we get over 1 million hits every month. So,
thank you.
You bet. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you.